I never thought I would be the kind of man who stands in the back of a church, watching his ex-wife walk down the aisle toward another man, holding evidence that would shatter her entire world. But life has a way of turning you into someone you never expected to become. And betrayal, real betrayal from someone you loved with everything you had, it changes the very fabric of who you are. My name is Marcus Cole, and 3 years ago, I was a completely different person. I was married to a woman named Vanessa, and I believed with every fiber of my being that we would grow old together. We had been together for 8 years, married for 5 of those, and I thought I knew her better than I knew myself. I thought I understood her dreams, her fears, her heart. I thought we were partners in every sense of the word. I was wrong about everything. This is the story of how she cheated, how she lied to everyone around us, and how I exposed the truth at her wedding to the very man she had been sleeping with behind my back. This is the story of my revenge, and I need you to understand something before I begin. I am not proud of everything I did, but I am not ashamed either. When someone takes your trust and crushes it beneath their heel, when they gaslight you into believing you are the problem, when they steal years of your life and make you question your own sanity, you earn the right to seek justice. And that is exactly what I did. Let me take you back to where it all began. I met Vanessa during my 3rd year working at a marketing firm in Chicago. I had moved there from a small town in Ohio, determined to build something meaningful with my life. My parents had divorced when I was 12, and I had watched my father crumble from the betrayal my mother inflicted on him. She had left him for his business partner, a man who had sat at our dinner table every Sunday, who had called my father his best friend. I saw what that did to my dad. I saw him lose his business, his confidence, his will to live for several years. I swore to myself that I would never be that vulnerable, that I would never let someone have that kind of power over me. And then I met Vanessa, and all those walls came tumbling down. She was working as a junior account executive at a competing firm. We met at an industry conference, both of us hovering near the coffee station, making sarcastic comments about the keynote speaker who kept using the word synergy as if it would solve world hunger. She had this laugh, this bright and unguarded laugh that seemed to fill the entire room. Her hair was dark and fell in waves past her shoulders. Her eyes were this warm brown that seemed to hold flecks of gold when the light hit them just right. She was beautiful, but it was more than that. She was magnetic. We exchanged numbers that day, and within a week, we were inseparable. Within 3 months, I was hopelessly in love. Within a year, I had proposed, and she had said yes with tears streaming down her face, telling me I was the only man she had ever truly loved. I believed her. God help me. I believed every word. Our marriage started out beautifully. We bought a small townhouse in Lincoln Park, and we talked about having children someday. We talked about traveling the world together when we retired. We built a life that felt solid and real, and I threw myself into making her happy. I worked long hours to advance my career because I wanted to provide for us. I wanted to give her everything she deserved. Looking back now, I can see the signs I missed. The late nights she started working, the way she would angle her phone screen away from me when she texted, the new gym membership that she never seemed to actually use, but always seemed to make her return home later than expected, the sudden interest in her appearance that went beyond normal self-care, new lingerie I never saw, perfume I did not recognize. But when you trust someone completely, you do not look for evidence of their betrayal. You explain away every red flag because the alternative is too painful to consider. The first crack in my reality appeared on a Thursday evening in October, about 3.5 years into our marriage. I had come home early from work because I was not feeling well. I had caught some kind of cold that was going around the office, and my boss had practically ordered me to go home before I infected everyone else. I remember being grateful for the excuse to leave early, thinking maybe Vanessa and I could order takeout and watch a movie together. When I walked through the front door, the house was quiet. Vanessa's car was in the driveway, so I knew she was home, but she did not answer when I called out her name. I found her in our bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at her phone with an expression I had never seen before. It was something between guilt and longing, and when she heard me enter, she jumped as if I had fired a gun. Her phone disappeared into her pocket faster than I could blink, and she plastered on a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. She asked me what I was doing home so early, and her voice was higher than usual, tighter. I told her I was sick, and she made all the right noises of concern, but something felt off. Something felt deeply, fundamentally wrong. That night, after she fell asleep, I did something I had never done before in our entire relationship. I looked at her phone. I know what you might be thinking. That was an invasion of privacy. That was a violation of trust. And you would be right. But something in my gut was screaming at me, and I have learned the hard way that ignoring your instincts is the fastest path to destruction. Her phone was locked, but I knew her passcode. It was the date we had first met, a detail she had always found romantic. The irony of that is not lost on me now. What I found in her messages changed everything. There were texts from someone saved in her phone simply as work client. But these were not professional messages. These were intimate. These were explicit in ways that made my stomach turn. These were messages between two people who were deeply involved with each other, who were planning a future together, who were counting down the days until they could be together openly. The messages went back months, months of lies, months of deception, months of her coming home to me, kissing me, sleeping beside me, while carrying on an entire relationship with another man. His name was Derek Ashford. I learned later that he was a senior partner at her firm, a man 15 years older than her with a reputation for charm and ambition. He was wealthy, connected, and married himself. But that did not seem to matter to either of them. I sat in our living room for hours that night, reading through their messages, piecing together the timeline of their affair. They had started sleeping together about 8 months earlier, during a company retreat in Miami. What had begun as a drunken mistake had evolved into something more. Derek was promising to leave his wife for her. He was promising her a future filled with luxury and travel and everything she claimed she never needed when she was with me. And Vanessa was eating it up. In her messages to him, she talked about me like I was an obstacle, a burden, a boring placeholder she was tolerating until something better came along. She mocked my dedication to work. She complained about my lack of ambition compared to Derek. She even made fun of the way I would leave little notes for her around the house, calling them childish and embarrassing. That one hurt more than almost anything else. Those notes were my way of showing her I loved her. I would leave them in her lunch, on the bathroom mirror, tucked into her coat pocket. Little reminders that she was cherished. Little pieces of my heart I offered freely, and she had been laughing about them with her lover. I did not sleep that night. I sat in the darkness of our living room, watching the sun rise through the window, feeling my entire world collapse around me. Everything I thought I knew was a lie. The woman sleeping upstairs was a stranger, and I had been married to a ghost. You might expect that I confronted her immediately, that I stormed upstairs and demanded answers, threw her clothes out on the lawn, and filed for divorce that very morning. That is what happens in movies, in dramatic television shows. But real life is messier than that. Real life is complicated by shock and denial, and the desperate, pathetic hope that maybe you misunderstood something. I did not confront her. Not yet. Instead, I started watching. I started paying attention to every detail I had previously overlooked. I started documenting. Over the following weeks, I became a detective in my own marriage. I noted every time she said she was working late and tracked whether her car was actually at the office. I paid attention to every lie, every inconsistency in her stories. I started gathering evidence methodically, photographing messages when I could, saving emails she carelessly left open on the shared computer, recording dates and times of her deceptions. Part of me was building a case for the inevitable divorce, but another part of me, a darker part that I had not known existed, was planning something else entirely. I was planning to destroy her the way she had destroyed me, not through violence, not through anything illegal, but through exposure, through truth, through consequences. Derek Ashford was still married to his wife, a woman named Catherine who came from old money and had connections throughout Chicago's social elite. If Catherine found out about the affair, Derek's comfortable life would crumble. His marriage, his reputation, his standing in the community. Everything he had built on a foundation of family values and professional respectability would come crashing down. And Vanessa, who had always been obsessed with her image, with being perceived as perfect and admirable, would be exposed for what she really was. A liar, a cheat, a woman who had betrayed her husband while smiling at him across the dinner table. But I knew that simply exposing them was not enough. I needed to be strategic. I needed to wait for the perfect moment. I needed to ensure that when the truth came out, it would cause maximum damage with no possibility of them spinning the narrative in their favor. So I waited, and I watched, and I planned. 2 months after I discovered the affair, Vanessa came home one evening with a strange expression on her face. She sat me down in the living room, and for one wild moment, I thought she was going to confess. I thought maybe she had finally developed a conscience and was going to tell me the truth. Instead, she told me she wanted a divorce. She had prepared a whole speech. She claimed she was unhappy, that we had grown apart, that she needed to find herself. She never mentioned Derek. She never mentioned the affair. She looked me straight in the eyes and lied about everything, painting herself as a victim of a marriage that had simply run its course, rather than a woman who had been unfaithful for nearly a year. I played along. I acted devastated, which was not entirely an act. Despite everything I knew, despite the months of documented betrayal, part of me had still hoped I was wrong. Part of me had still hoped there was some explanation I had missed. But there was no explanation. There was only the truth, ugly and undeniable. We began divorce proceedings, and Vanessa pushed for a quick and simple dissolution. She did not want to fight over assets. She did not want a prolonged legal battle. She just wanted out, as fast as possible. At the time, I thought she was being reasonable. Now I realize she was simply eager to move on to her new life with Derek. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. I moved out of our townhouse and into a small apartment downtown. I threw myself into work, earning a promotion that I barely cared about. I started running again, something I had let slip during my marriage, and I found that the physical exhaustion helped quiet the noise in my head. But I never stopped watching. I never stopped gathering information. 6 months after our divorce, Vanessa's relationship with Derek became public. Catherine Ashford had discovered the affair on her own, through credit card statements showing hotel charges and jewelry purchases her husband could not explain. Their divorce was nasty and public, playing out in society columns and whispered conversations throughout their social circle. Derek left Catherine with a settlement that cost him nearly half his fortune, but he seemed unbothered. He had Vanessa now, and that was apparently worth any price. Within a year, Derek had proposed. Vanessa was going to become the second Mrs. Ashford, and she was determined to make it the social event of the season. I heard about the engagement through mutual friends, through social media posts, through the elaborate announcements they sent to everyone they knew. They were getting married at a historic church on the North Shore, followed by a reception at one of Chicago's most exclusive venues. The guest list read like a who's who of the city's business and social elite. Vanessa was going to have her fairy tale ending, and she was going to make sure everyone watched her get it. That was when I realized what I needed to do. You see, in the 2 years since our divorce, I had not just been nursing my wounds and rebuilding my life. I had been investigating. I had been digging into Derek Ashford's past, his business dealings, his secrets, and I had found things that made my own betrayal look almost innocent by comparison. Derek Ashford had built his fortune not through honest work, but through fraud. He had been systematically embezzling from his company for over a decade, hiding the money in offshore accounts and shell corporations. He had defrauded investors, manipulated contracts, and destroyed the careers of anyone who threatened to expose him. He had done this all while presenting himself as a pillar of the community, a generous philanthropist, a devoted family man. I had stumbled onto this information almost by accident. One of the mutual friends Vanessa and I had shared before our divorce was a woman named Rachel, who worked in forensic accounting. After our divorce, Rachel had reached out to me, feeling guilty that she had known about Vanessa's affair and had not told me. She had suspected something was going on, but had convinced herself it was not her place to interfere. Guilt made Rachel want to help me, and when I mentioned that I was curious about Derek's business dealings, she offered to look into it quietly. What she found was staggering. Derek had been cooking the books at his firm for years, siphoning money into hidden accounts and creating false expenses to cover his tracks. He had bribed auditors and threatened employees who asked too many questions. He had even forged signatures on documents to secure loans he had no intention of repaying. The evidence Rachel compiled was damning, it was thorough, and it was exactly what I needed. But evidence alone was not enough. I needed to ensure that when the truth came out, it could not be buried or dismissed. I needed the revelation to be so public, so undeniable, that there would be no escape. I started planning the exposure more than 6 months before the wedding. I needed to get into that ceremony. I needed to be there when the truth came out. And I needed to ensure that every guest, every important person in Derek's carefully curated world, witnessed his downfall. The first challenge was getting invited. Vanessa had made it clear during our divorce that she wanted nothing more to do with me. Our mutual friends had largely chosen sides, and most had drifted into her orbit. I was not on the guest list, and I was not going to receive an invitation through normal channels. But I had one advantage. I had spent years in marketing, and I understood how to build relationships and leverage connections. I started reconnecting with people from my past, not obviously or desperately, but naturally. I attended industry events where I knew Derek's business associates would be present. I joined a golf club where several of his partners were members. I slowly, patiently inserted myself into circles that overlapped with his. It took 8 months, but eventually, I found my way in. A business contact named Philip, who had worked with Derek years earlier and was on the guest list, mentioned that he was looking for a +1 for the wedding. His wife had a prior commitment and could not attend, and he did not want to show up alone. I casually mentioned that I would be happy to accompany him if he needed someone. Philip had no idea about my connection to Vanessa. To him, I was simply Marcus Cole, marketing professional and fellow golf enthusiast. He accepted my offer gratefully, and just like that, I had my invitation. The months leading up to the wedding were consumed with preparation. I worked with Rachel to compile all the evidence into a format that would be impossible to dismiss. We created a presentation with documents, financial records, emails, and testimony from former employees who had been wronged by Derek and were willing to speak out. But I knew that simply presenting this evidence at the wedding would not work. Security would remove me before I could say 10 words. I needed a different approach. That was when I thought of the video. Modern weddings often feature elaborate video presentations, slideshows of the happy couple, messages from friends and family who could not attend, sentimental montages set to romantic music. I learned that Vanessa and Derek had commissioned a professional video production company to create just such a presentation for their reception. Getting access to that company was surprisingly easy. I posed as a representative from the venue, claiming there were some technical questions about the presentation format. The production company was happy to share details about their setup, including the fact that they would be uploading the final video to a cloud server that would be accessed during the reception. With Rachel's help, I was able to identify the server and gain access. We did not delete or damage anything. We simply added something. Right after the professionally produced love story video, we inserted our own presentation. A documentary, if you will, about who Derek Ashford really was. The presentation included everything. Financial documents showing the embezzlement, emails where Derek discussed hiding money and bribing officials, testimony from 3 former employees whose careers he had destroyed. A statement from an investigative journalist who had been building a story about him for months and was planning to publish within weeks, regardless. We also included something else. Evidence of Vanessa's complicity. You see, during my investigation, I had discovered that Vanessa was not just Derek's girlfriend and then fiancée. She had become his partner in crime. In the year since their relationship became public, she had been helping him hide money, serving as a signatory on several of the shell corporations he used for embezzlement. Whether she knew the full extent of his fraud or simply did not ask questions, she was legally implicated. The woman who had looked me in the eyes and told me she just was not happy anymore was now an accomplice to financial crimes. She had traded one life for another, and the new life came with serious legal consequences. I debated for weeks about whether to include this information. Exposing Derek was one thing. He was a criminal who had hurt countless people and deserved whatever consequences came his way. But Vanessa was my ex-wife. Despite everything, despite the betrayal and the lies, part of me still remembered the woman I had fallen in love with at that industry conference. Part of me did not want to destroy her completely, but then I remembered the notes. The little love notes I had left her that she had mocked to her lover. I remembered how she had looked me in the eyes and lied, not once, but hundreds of times. I remembered how she had thrown away our marriage for a man whose fortune was built on fraud and exploitation. She had made her choices, and choices have consequences. The day of the wedding arrived on a crisp Saturday in late May. The weather was perfect, clear skies and gentle breeze, as if the universe was conspiring to make the day beautiful. I arrived with Philip, dressed in my best suit, looking every inch the respectable guest. The ceremony was held in a beautiful old church with stained glass windows and dark wooden pews. I sat near the back, watching the guests filter in, watching the elaborate flower arrangements and the string quartet. It was all so perfect, so carefully choreographed to present an image of love and commitment. Vanessa walked down the aisle in a stunning white gown that must have cost more than my car. Her hair was swept up in an elegant arrangement and her face glowed with happiness. She looked more beautiful than I had ever seen her, and for just a moment, watching her approach her groom, I felt a flicker of doubt. Was I really going to do this? Was I really going to destroy this moment? This day she had been planning for over a year? Then I saw Derek at the altar, smiling at her with that practiced charm I had come to recognize as nothing more than a mask. I thought about all the people he had cheated, all the lives he had ruined, all the money he had stolen while presenting himself as a generous benefactor. And I thought about me, about the years I had wasted with a woman who had never really loved me, about the trust I had given that had been thrown back in my face, about the future I had imagined that had been stolen by their lies. My doubt evaporated. They deserved each other, and they both deserved what was coming. The ceremony was long and traditional, filled with readings about love and commitment that rang hollow, given what I knew. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising to cherish and support each other through whatever challenges life might bring. The irony was almost painful. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the church erupted in applause. Vanessa and Derek kissed, their guests showered them with congratulations, and the whole affair moved to the reception venue a few blocks away. The reception was even more lavish than the ceremony. The venue was a historic mansion that had been transformed into a wonderland of flowers, candles, and elegant decorations. A live band played as guests mingled with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. There were ice sculptures and a photo booth and a cake that looked like it belonged in a museum rather than on a dessert table. I stayed in the background, nursing a drink, watching and waiting. I spoke with Philip and a few of his business associates, playing my role as the perfectly normal wedding guest. No one suspected anything. No one had any idea what was about to happen. The dinner was served, speech after speech praising the happy couple and wishing them well. Derek's best man, a hedge fund manager who had benefited from some of Derek's questionable deals, gave a particularly nauseating toast about what a wonderful man Derek was and how lucky Vanessa was to have found him. I watched Vanessa's face throughout the speeches, looking for any sign of guilt or doubt. But she seemed genuinely happy, genuinely content with the life she had chosen. She had convinced herself that she deserved this, that the end justified the means, that whatever wrongs she had committed were in the past and did not matter anymore. She was wrong. After the formal toasts, the lights dimmed and a projection screen was lowered at the front of the room. A member of the wedding party announced that they had a special video to share, a look back at Derek and Vanessa's love story. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure people could hear it. This was it. This was the moment I had been planning for nearly 2 years. Everything had led to this. The video began with the professionally produced content, photos of Derek and Vanessa together, clips of them laughing and traveling and looking lovingly into each other's eyes. Romantic music played in the background. Guests smiled and whispered about how perfect they were together. Then the video changed. The romantic music stopped. The photos disappeared. In their place, a stark white screen with black text appeared. The truth about Derek Ashford. I heard confused murmurs from the guests. Someone called out, asking if there was a technical problem. But there was no problem. Everything was working exactly as I had planned. The presentation began with financial documents, clearly labeled and explained. Columns of numbers showing money that had been moved from company accounts to offshore holdings. Emails with Derek's signature discussing how to hide assets from auditors. Bank statements, corporate filings. Everything laid out in undeniable detail. Derek's face went white. He jumped up from the head table and started shouting at the staff to turn it off, to stop the video. But the system was designed to keep playing regardless of local input. The file was streaming from a remote server, and there was nothing they could do to stop it in the venue. The presentation continued. Former employees appeared on screen, their faces serious, their voices steady, describing how Derek had ruined their careers when they questioned his accounting practices. One woman explained how she had been fired and blacklisted from the industry after she reported suspected fraud to HR. A man described how Derek had threatened his family if he spoke to investigators. The room was in chaos. Some guests were staring at the screen in horror. Others were trying to leave. A few were on their phones, presumably calling lawyers or journalists or both. Derek was screaming at his security team, but they could not stop what was already happening. And then came the part about Vanessa. Documents appeared showing her name on corporate filings for shell companies connected to Derek's embezzlement. Emails she had sent helping coordinate the movement of money. Evidence that she had known, at least partially, what Derek was doing and had chosen to participate rather than report it. I watched her face as she saw her name on the screen. The color drained from her cheeks. She looked at Derek, then at the screen, then at the hundreds of guests who were watching her crimes exposed in front of everyone she had ever wanted to impress. She started crying. Not the delicate tears of a wronged woman, but the ugly, heaving sobs of someone watching their entire world collapse. Derek was screaming something about lawsuits and security, but it was too late. The damage was done. Every guest at that wedding had seen the evidence. Many had recorded it on their phones. Within hours, it would be all over social media and news sites. There was no spinning this, no public relations strategy that could make it go away. I finished my drink and quietly made my way toward the exit. My work here was done. As I passed near the head table, Vanessa caught sight of me. Our eyes met across the chaotic room, and I watched recognition dawn on her face. She knew. She understood exactly who was responsible for what had just happened. She mouthed something at me, but I could not hear it over the noise. It might have been why, or it might have been something less polite. It did not matter. I did not owe her an explanation. She knew exactly why. I walked out of the reception into the cool evening air and stood on the steps of the mansion, watching police cars begin to arrive. Someone at the wedding had called law enforcement, and investigators would be very interested in the evidence that had just been presented to a room full of witnesses. Philip found me outside a few minutes later, looking shell-shocked. He kept asking me if I knew anything about what had happened, if I had any idea who could have done this. I told him I was as surprised as everyone else, that I had no connection to the happy couple beyond being his plus one. He believed me. Why would he not? I was just Marcus Cole, regular guy, innocent bystander caught up in someone else's scandal. The aftermath of the wedding was even more satisfying than the event itself. The video spread across the internet within hours. News outlets picked up the story by the next morning. "Wedding video exposes embezzlement scandal" was the headline in the local paper. National business publications covered it extensively, especially after several of Derek's former colleagues came forward with additional evidence now that they knew they would not be alone. Derek was arrested within a week. The evidence presented at the wedding, combined with the testimony of witnesses and the files that mysteriously appeared on several journalists' desks, was more than enough to secure an indictment. He faced multiple federal charges for fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, and witness tampering. His trial lasted 3 months and resulted in a conviction on nearly every count. He was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, along with orders to pay restitution that would drain whatever assets he had not already hidden. Vanessa's situation was more complicated. The evidence against her was less extensive, showing complicity rather than primary responsibility. Her lawyers argued that she had not fully understood what Derek was doing, that she had simply trusted her partner and followed his instructions without questioning them. The prosecution did not entirely buy this argument, but they were willing to negotiate. In exchange for her testimony against Derek and full cooperation with investigators, Vanessa received a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit fraud and was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years of probation. 2 years might not sound like much, but for Vanessa, it was devastating. Her carefully constructed image of perfection was shattered. The society friends she had courted abandoned her. The business contacts she had cultivated wanted nothing to do with a convicted felon. The luxury life she had betrayed our marriage to obtain was gone, replaced by an orange jumpsuit and a prison cell. I followed her case from a distance, through news reports and occasional updates from Rachel. I did not feel joy at her suffering exactly. That is not the right word. What I felt was something closer to satisfaction, a sense that justice had been served, that consequences had finally caught up with someone who had believed she could escape them. But I also felt something else, something unexpected. Relief. For years, I had carried the weight of what Vanessa had done to me. The betrayal, the lies, the way she had made me doubt myself, made me question whether I had somehow been responsible for the failure of our marriage. That weight had shaped every decision I made, every relationship I considered, every moment I spent alone wondering what was wrong with me that she had needed someone else. Watching her face consequences for her choices freed me from that weight. It was not about revenge, not really. It was about closure. It was about knowing that the universe was not entirely unjust, that sometimes people who do terrible things actually have to face what they have done. In the months after the wedding, I started to rebuild my life in earnest. I changed jobs, leaving the marketing firm for a position at a smaller company where I could have more impact. I started seeing a therapist, working through the damage that years of deception had done to my ability to trust. I reconnected with old friends I had pushed away during my dark period, and I began to accept that what happened was not my fault. I also met someone new. Her name is Sarah, and she is nothing like Vanessa. She is straightforward where Vanessa was manipulative. She is honest where Vanessa was deceptive. She says what she means and means what she says, and I never have to wonder whether she is telling me the truth. We have been together for almost a year now, and while I cannot say that I trust completely, not the way I once did, I am learning. I am healing. I am becoming someone new, someone stronger than the man who sat in the dark reading his wife's messages to her lover. Sometimes Sarah asks about my past, about my marriage, about why I am sometimes hesitant to believe good things when they happen. I have told her some of it, the broad strokes of the betrayal and the divorce. But I have not told her about the wedding. I have not told her about what I did. Maybe someday I will. Maybe she will understand. Or maybe she will look at me differently, see someone capable of calculated destruction, and wonder what else I might be capable of. That is a risk I am not yet ready to take. But I do not regret what I did. I want to be clear about that. People often ask, in situations like this, whether the person seeking revenge ever feels guilty or wishes they had handled things differently. I have thought about that question a lot over the past year. The truth is that Derek Ashford was a criminal who had been hurting people for decades. The evidence I exposed was going to come out eventually. The journalist I mentioned was already preparing a story that would have achieved similar results. All I did was accelerate the timeline and choose the venue. As for Vanessa, she made her choices. She chose to cheat on me. She chose to lie. She chose to get involved with a man she knew was married. She chose to participate in his financial crimes. Every step of the way, she had opportunities to make different decisions, and every step of the way, she chose the path that served her immediate desires without concern for consequences. The wedding exposure did not create her situation. It simply revealed what was already there. I think about my father sometimes, about how he crumbled after my mother's betrayal. He let what she did define the rest of his life. He became a shadow of himself, bitter and broken, unable to move past what had been done to him. I refuse to let that be my story. I refuse to be a victim who simply accepted what happened and tried to move on without seeking any kind of justice. I took action. I took control. I made sure that the people who had wronged me faced consequences for their actions, and then I let it go. That is the part people do not always understand about revenge. It is not about dwelling in anger forever. It is not about letting hatred consume your life. It is about restoring balance, about ensuring that wrongs are addressed, and then it is about moving forward. I moved forward. Vanessa is out of prison now, completing her probation and trying to rebuild some semblance of a life. I heard through the grapevine that she is working at a nonprofit, trying to reinvent herself as someone who has learned from her mistakes. Maybe she has. Maybe prison changed her. I honestly do not care enough to find out. Derek is still serving his sentence and will be for another decade. His assets were seized, his reputation destroyed, his comfortable life reduced to whatever existence he can construct behind bars. He lost everything that mattered to him, just like he made so many other people lose everything. Catherine, Derek's first wife, reached out to me about 6 months after the wedding. She had figured out who was responsible for the video, tracked me down through some mutual connection. I expected anger. I expected threats of legal action. Instead, she thanked me. She told me that she had suspected Derek's crimes for years, but had never been able to prove anything. She had been gaslit and manipulated just like me, made to believe she was paranoid or crazy when she questioned discrepancies in their finances. The wedding video had given her validation, proof that her instincts had been right all along. We had dinner a few times after that, not romantically, just two people who had been damaged by the same man, finding some comfort in shared experience. She has moved on now, remarried to someone who actually treats her well, and we exchange holiday cards once a year. There is one more thing I need to tell you, something I discovered only recently. A few months ago, I received a letter with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a handwritten message. It was from Vanessa. She wrote that she understood now why I had done what I did. She wrote that prison had given her time to think, to really examine the choices she had made and the person she had become. She did not ask for forgiveness, and she did not try to explain or justify her actions. She simply acknowledged that she had wronged me, that she had destroyed something real in pursuit of something hollow, and that she was sorry. I stared at that letter for a long time. Part of me wanted to throw it away, to refuse to give her words any space in my mind. But another part of me recognized that this was what I had been waiting for without knowing it. Acknowledgement. Recognition that what she did was wrong. An admission that I had not imagined my own betrayal. I did not respond to the letter. I did not need to. But I kept it, tucked away in a drawer, as evidence that even people who seem incapable of self-reflection can sometimes find their way to truth. That is my story. That is how I went from a loving husband to a man who exposed his ex-wife at her wedding. That is the journey from trust to betrayal to revenge to, eventually, something like peace. If you are listening to this and you have been betrayed by someone you loved, I want you to know that you are not alone. I want you to know that the pain you are feeling is real and valid. And I want you to know that there is life on the other side. Whether you choose to seek revenge or simply to walk away, whether you pursue justice or decide that justice is not worth the energy, the most important thing is that you do not let the betrayal define you. Do not let what they did turn you into a permanent victim. Take whatever time you need to grieve and rage and process, and then find a way to move forward. For me, that forward movement came through action, through refusing to accept what had happened without consequence, through showing the world, and more importantly showing myself, that I was not someone who could be deceived and discarded without any repercussions. Your path might be different. Your healing might come through forgiveness or therapy, or simply the passage of time. There is no right answer, no universal solution. There is only what works for you, what allows you to sleep at night, what lets you eventually find peace. I found my peace. It came in an unexpected way, through exposure and consequences, and the knowledge that the people who hurt me could not escape what they had done. But it came, and that is what matters. Today, I am building a life that is better than the one I lost. I have a partner who loves me honestly. I have a career that fulfills me. I have friends who know my story and support me anyway. I have a future that is not defined by Vanessa's choices, but by my own. The man who walked out of that wedding reception, who stood on the steps watching police cars arrive, was not the same man who had discovered those text messages years earlier. He was stronger. He was wiser. He was free. And that, in the end, is the best revenge of all. Not the exposure, not the arrests, not the prison sentences or the destroyed reputations or the shattered fairy tale wedding. The best revenge is becoming someone they could never break. Someone who took the worst they could offer and transformed it into fuel for a better life. Someone who refused to be defined by betrayal and instead chose to define themselves by resilience. That is who I am now. That is who I will continue to be. And if Vanessa ever thinks about me, if she ever wonders how the man she discarded ended up, I hope she knows this. I hope she knows that I am happy, that I am loved, that I am whole. I hope it haunts her. But honestly, even if it does not, even if she never gives me another thought for the rest of her life, that is fine too. Because I do not need her to suffer for me to thrive. I do not need her regret to validate my healing. I do not need anything from her at all. I never did. The only thing I ever needed was what she took from me and what I eventually reclaimed for myself. The truth. And now everyone knows it.